So one of the biggest recruiting storylines in all of college football has come to a head as five-star edge, the number one edge in the nation and the number one player in the state of Texas, Colin Simmons, has made his collegiate decision, choosing the Texas Longhorns over the LSU Tigers. And today, well, we need to break it down, but before we can, as always, y'all know the drill, I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you surprised Colin Simmons chose to commit to Texas over LSU? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it, and if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's jump right into this, and we're going to start this off by posing the question I know Texas fans already know the answer to, but it's what we do around here. Who is Colin Simmons? Well, as I alluded to in the intro, Colin Simmons isn't only one of the best edges in the nation. He's not only the best player in the state of Texas, he's one of the best football players in all of high school football. If we look at the 24/7 Sports Composite, he comes in as the number 8 player in the nation, regardless of position, the number 1 edge, and the number 1 player in the state of Texas. So for the Longhorns, this is a massive win for multiple different reasons. First and foremost, the obvious. You get to keep the number 1 player in your state within the state of Texas, and that is always a phenomenal win. Because I don't have to tell Longhorn fans what happened just a few cycles ago whenever LSU came into the state of Texas and walked out with the number 1 player in your state who turned out to be Harold Perkins. That's worked out pretty well for the Tigers, as Harold Perkins is one of the most exciting college football players we have in the game, and he's only going to continue getting better. The last thing Texas needed was LSU to walk back into the state and pull the number 1 player in the state again, and then pair Harold Perkins and Colin Simmons, especially given the fact Texas is making the exit from the Big 12 to the SEC. You want to have those guys on your roster. You don't want to go play LSU in Death Valley, look up on a 4th down or a 3rd down where you really need this conversion and you see Harold Perkins and Colin Simmons looking at you. That's not the situation you want to be in if you're Texas. Luckily, you now have Colin Simmons on your side, and keeping the number 1 player in your state home, that's a massive win. The second reason it's a massive win is the job Steve Sarkisian and company did to get this win, where LSU has been putting on a full court press for Colin Simmons for quite some time. This year, the Texas Longhorns started matching that. He was always a prospect that they liked, but this year they really started matching that, and down the stretch, they put in fantastic work, ultimately winning the battle. And this is such a big win because of the position Colin Simmons plays. Whenever we talk about the Texas defense, the first thing we have got to acknowledge are the positions that make that defense tick. For PK, we're talking about those edge rushers. What better way to make sure your defense is getting the guys that make it tick than by getting the number 1 player at that position, a top 10 player in the nation, then cherry on top is that he's the number 1 player in your state. That's what makes this such a big win. We can look at the totality of circumstances that go into this and see this is very impressive. And in my opinion, it's been very impressive seeing how Steve Sarkisian and company have recruited relative to previous Texas coaching staffs. Because to me, it really proves a fact and a point I've been saying for a while, that it felt like previous Texas coaching staffs were recruiting to stars as opposed to recruiting to need, where when we look at Steve Sarkisian and company, they're recruiting to need. I go back to last year's class, where the biggest need in that class, they needed edge, but they really needed some help at the inside linebacker position. I mean, that was a must for the Longhorns. What do they end up with? None other than Anthony Hill, the number 1 inside linebacker in the nation, 5-star, who tore it up during the Texas spring game. Now there's a scenario where you get to pair Anthony Hill and Colin Simmons on your defense. Now, one thing we have all got to acknowledge is that Texas is going to continue a full court press on Colin Simmons until ink hits paper. Why? Because LSU is going to continue a full court press on Colin Simmons until ink hits paper, and I don't think they're going to be alone. Why would they be? Every college in the nation should do their due diligence and continue chipping away at a player like Colin Simmons because he has that ability. He has true game-breaking, difference-making ability, and that's exactly what the Longhorns need in this defense if they're going to make it tick. Making the move from the Big 12 to the SEC means some things are going to change, and luckily, Steve Sarkisian and so many members of this staff have been in the SEC. They know what it takes to be successful in the SEC, and now they're trying to take that blueprint and apply it to the Texas Longhorns, something I find very fascinating. But at the end of all of this, I've got to hear from all of you because I just don't think think there's a world where we can undersell what a big win this is for the Texas Longhorns. We have to also acknowledge what this means for the Longhorns recruiting class, where it puts them within the top 20 recruiting classes in the nation. But to me, that's only a small piece of this story. In fact, it might be the smallest piece of this story. Because I think the more pertinent question to ask, instead of where does this put the Texas recruiting class, what does this mean for the Texas recruiting class going forward? We talk about here on the channel all the time that some of these guys have the ability to be major catalysts in their recruiting class. They have the ability to be a domino effect or a snowball effect, if you will, where one thing falls, but it's the byproduct of that thing falling that we really need to watch. Could that happen with Colin Simmons? And to me, I think it's very interesting, something we need to watch, because I can imagine there's a lot of players in high school football that would like to play with Colin Simmons. He has difference-making ability. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Texas recruiting, but one thing we have got to acknowledge is that the Longhorns over the past month have absolutely caught fire. I can't wait to see what comes next. Hop down in the comments, let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.